It begins with a scream in the dark. Not a human scream. Not exactly. Something sharper. Animal, but wrong. Close enough to freeze the blood of anyone who hears it echo through the pines of southern New Jersey. For nearly 300 years, people have asked the same question. What, exactly, was moving through those woods? The Jersey Devil is one of America's strangest legends. Not because it is the most believable, and not because it is the most terrifying, but because it feels like something that should have faded long ago. And somehow, it never did. Long before it became a tourist symbol, a hockey mascot, or a campfire story, the Jersey Devil belonged to a place that already felt hostile to outsiders. The Pine Barrens stretch across more than 1 million acres of forest, swamp, sand, and silence. Even now, parts of it feel disconnected from the rest of the East Coast. Roads vanish, phone signals weaken, the trees close in. At night, the darkness is thick enough to feel physical. It is the kind of landscape that does half the work for any legend. But the story of the Jersey Devil did not begin in the woods. It began in a house. According to the oldest version of the legend, sometime in the 1700s, a woman known only as Mother Leeds gave birth to her 13th child. Overwhelmed, desperate, and cursed by bad fortune, she cried out that the baby would be the devil. And then, the story says, it was. The child was born normal enough, but within moments it changed. Its body twisted, wings tore from its back, its face became something inhuman. It killed the midwife, attacked the room, and shot up the chimney into the night. It is a perfect piece of folklore. A cursed mother, an unnatural birth, a monster that does not come from some distant world, but from inside the home itself. But that is exactly why the legend becomes more interesting when you look closer. Because the Jersey Devil may not have started as a monster story at all. It may have started as a family scandal. The Leeds family was real. They lived in colonial New Jersey, and they had a long public history of conflict, politics, religion, and enemies. Daniel Leeds, one of the most prominent members of the family, was a publisher and almanac maker in the late 1600s and early 1700s. He clashed with Quakers, he printed astrological symbols, he published ideas some people considered occult or spiritually dangerous. In a deeply religious colonial society, that was enough to damage a reputation. Then things got worse. Leeds was accused of being arrogant, corrupt, and spiritually suspect. His almanacs were denounced. His name became associated with heresy, bad omens, and hidden knowledge. Political fights turned personal. Personal fights became myth. And over time, Leeds seems to have slowly shifted into something darker. Not just an unpopular family, a cursed bloodline. That matters because folklore rarely appears from nowhere. It grows where fear and resentment already exist. And the Jersey Devil sits at the exact point where rumor, religion, and local hostility can turn a real family into a supernatural warning. In that version of the story, the monster is not born in one night. It is made over generations. Still, a family feud alone does not keep a legend alive for centuries. For that, you need sightings. And the Jersey Devil has them in abundance. By the 1800s, reports were spreading through the region. Witnesses described a bizarre creature with a horse-like head, bat wings, claws, a long neck, and a scream unlike anything they had heard before. The details varied, but that almost helped the legend. A blurry monster is easier to believe than a precise one. It can fit whatever the witness fears most. Then came the week that locked the creature into American folklore. January 1909. Across southern New Jersey and nearby parts of Pennsylvania, panic exploded. Newspapers printed fresh reports almost daily. People claimed the creature was seen flying over towns, crossing roads, attacking trolleys, terrifying livestock, and leaving strange hoof prints in the snow. Those prints were found in places that made no sense: on rooftops, in narrow alleys, across frozen rivers, ending abruptly, as if whatever made them had simply taken off into the air. Schools closed, factories shut down. Armed groups formed to hunt the creature, and suddenly, what had once been local folklore became mass hysteria. This is the point where the Jersey Devil stops being just a monster story and becomes something more revealing. Because 1909 was not a medieval village, it was the modern age. Newspapers, rail lines, police, public institutions. This was a society that liked to think of itself as rational. And yet, it only took a few days for entire communities to behave as if a winged demon might actually be circling overhead. Why? Part of the answer is obvious: winter, isolation, rumor, competition between newspapers, the thrill of shared fear. Once enough people expect to see something, ordinary sights begin to mutate. A strange bird becomes a monster. An odd track becomes proof. A distant cry becomes confirmation. But there is a deeper layer. The Jersey Devil emerged during a period when the Pine Barrens already carried a social stigma. The people who lived there were often portrayed by outsiders as backward, wild, and almost outside civilization. The region itself was treated as a strange pocket inside a rapidly modernizing state. So the legend did cultural work. It turned the Barrens into a borderland, a place where modern rules felt weaker, a place where old fears could survive. That is one reason the creature never fully disappeared. It was never just about the creature. It was about the map. There is something powerful about having a forbidden zone so close to major cities: New York, Philadelphia, Atlantic ports, industry, railroads, commerce. And then, not far away, a forest where people still whisper that something unnatural moves between the trees. The Jersey Devil gave the modern world a shadow just outside its own front door. And then there is the creature itself. Unlike many monsters, the Jersey Devil is not elegant. It is not seductive. It is not even consistent. It is a patchwork thing, half beast, half nightmare, assembled from rural fears and distorted memory. That awkwardness is part of its staying power. It feels witnessed rather than designed. A polished monster can become fiction too quickly. The Jersey Devil remains alive because it never quite settles into one clean image. Every generation redraws it a little differently, but the emotional core stays the same. Wrong shape, wrong sound, wrong place, that scream in the dark. Skeptics, of course, have offered explanations for years. Misidentified cranes, escaped animals, hoaxes, exaggerated tracks, collective panic amplified by sensational newspapers. All of those explanations are plausible. Some are probably true. In fact, the hoax theory around 1909 has real weight. Promoters and showmen in that era had every incentive to stage strange events. A fabricated monster could sell papers, attract crowds, and turn fear into profit overnight. And yet, even when a hoax is partly fake, that does not make it meaningless. Sometimes a hoax succeeds only because it lands on something people are already prepared to believe. That is the real secret of the Jersey Devil. Not whether it existed, but why so many people were ready to hear the cry, ready to see the tracks, ready to believe that something malformed and furious had escaped from history and flown into the present. And maybe that readiness tells us more than any footprint ever could. Because the Jersey Devil belongs to a very old category of fear, the fear that civilization is thinner than it looks. That beyond the lit window, beyond the road, beyond the edge of town, the world can still produce something ancient, irrational, and hostile to explanation. Not a dragon, not a ghost, something uglier, something local, something ours. That may be why the legend stayed alive while so many others faded. It adapted. In one century, it was a colonial curse. In another, a newspaper sensation. Later, a roadside myth. Then, a piece of pop culture. But at every stage, it preserved the same tension. The sense that beneath American normalcy, there are still pockets of unresolved darkness. And the Pine Barrens are perfect for that idea, because they resist full domestication. They do not behave like a neatly finished landscape. They still feel old. They still feel secretive. You can explain them on a map and still feel lost inside them. That is fertile ground for any monster, but especially one born from a mix of family ruin, religious fear, social stigma, wilderness anxiety, and media hysteria. The Jersey Devil is not one story. It is several stories fused together. A mother's curse, a political smear, a regional insult, a winter panic, a shape in the trees. That is why trying to solve the legend in a literal way almost misses the point. If someone proved tomorrow that every sighting came from birds, frauds, and frightened imaginations, the creature would still survive. Because people are not preserving evidence. They are preserving atmosphere. They are preserving a feeling. And legends built from feeling are much harder to kill than legends built from fact. Even today, people still claim they hear strange screams in the Barrens. Campers still trade warnings. Locals still tell stories with that careful half-smile that suggests uncertainty is part of the fun. Not full belief, but not full disbelief either. That middle space is where the Jersey Devil lives best. Not in proof, in possibility. And maybe that is the most unsettling part of all. The Jersey Devil never needed to convince everyone. It only needed to remain just credible enough, just distant enough, and just strange enough to keep one question alive whenever the woods go quiet. What was that? Because once a legend can do that, it no longer depends on sightings. It becomes part of the landscape itself, something you inherit along with the roads, the trees, and the stories told after dark. The Jersey Devil is still flying through American culture for the same reason it first rose from the Pine Barrens. Not because it was seen clearly, but because it was never fully seen at all. And sometimes, the things we cannot quite make out are the ones that stay with us the longest.